He chooses transit because a mortal cosmos is burning, and he needs a weapon the immaterium cannot spoil. He calculates a bridge of prime will through a quiet seam between breath and thought, what the locals name Kai, and folds his vast mind to a needle. He binds oaths to remember the cost, sets the converter to bleed his light, and steps without an army. A million futures recoil like struck glass. He accepts the crack. The breach ignites. Cloud cover above West City shears away. Blue becomes white gold, then black, then the polished bronze of a sun turned inward. A silhouette hangs in the seam, taller than a man, crowned in living fire, robes like a standard from a war no one here has named. Sound hits a second later, a hard report that rattles glass across districts. Bulma lowers a visor in Capsule Corp's upper lab, hair tied back, tablets slaved to 10 satellites, and a dozen stolen top-secret feeds. She watches the turbulence readout flatten under an unknown harmonic. "That's not a meteor," she says, voice cool over the internal net. "That's a someone." In the streets, a courier in orange takes cover behind his bike, helmet on, but eyes up. The sky looks like a wound being sutured. Children stare until their teacher shouts them into the gym, and the gym's long windows ripple as pressure breathes. He descends without moving. Space yields. Gravity learns a new obedience. He is the emperor of mankind, and the golden sun around him is not flame, but intention given radiance. He runs 1,000 calculations. Density of this world's soul stuff, texture of thought, the way power here wells from breath rather than belief, and he pays for the answers with a thin, invisible leak. A second wave of distortion tears off his entry like shrapnel. It drops toward the megacity's north sector, a hard ring of pressure that could scoop buildings like crumbs. He points, speaks without sound, and a luminous rampart rises. The shock front curls against it, splits, and spends itself harmlessly in high air. Every sensor at Capsule Corp pegs. Bulma's eyebrows go up. Hard shield with zero lag. He's reading the wavefronts. He's doing math faster than my array. On the lookout, Dende leans over the balustrade with a hand to his chest. "Someone's here, Mr. Popo," he whispers. "Not evil, not good, tall." Corin, far below, drops his staff. The cat's fur lifts as if by static. That taste on the air, not Kai. Something old, something that tells stories to storms. He lands in a clear plaza tangled with benches and capsule car kiosks. His boots kiss stone and leave no mark. The golden field contracts to a bare corona around his skin, and his gaze, ageless and aware, notes fear, courage, curiosity, anger in one sweep, and tags them as lives worth saving. Sirens strobe. 2 police flyers circle, then peel back at a hand signal from the pilot who read the training memo about de-escalating around gods. A young officer on the ground levels a trembling baton and puts it back down. The Emperor turns toward the nearest human, and the man's shoulders drop because the tall stranger has the kind of eyes that make soldiers stop shouting. "People of this city," the Emperor says, and everyone hears it in the language they dream in. "I come by choice and by cost. I will not harm you." Bulma doesn't wait for protocols to catch up. She's already riding the elevator down with a field kit, 2 capsules, and a ripped open pudding cup. Because if this goes Beerus level, she'd rather have a sugar peace offering than an apology. "Trunks, stay put," she says into the family channel. "Vegeta's off-world with Goku. I'll handle first contact." In the Kaioshin realm, Shin stiffens. The breezes over the crystal grass turn wary, as if they can smell a trespass. Something has crossed between realities, he tells Kibito, but not with time rings, with audacity. Kibito looks at the same distant point with narrowed eyes. "Shall we intervene, Lord Supreme Kai?" "We will watch." Shin says, even though every part of him wants to act. Gods who hurry break things. The Emperor feels observation like light rain on the back of his neck. Not hostile, hieratic. He marks it and keeps his attention on the street where a little boy in a capsule hoodie works up the courage to step forward with a melted ice cream. Sir, are you a hero? I'm a guardian, the Emperor says. He takes the melting cone, holds it, and frost crystallizes the drips. He returns it intact. The boy laughs as if the world just placed a hand on his head and blessed him. The city releases a collective half-breath. Then the sky rips again, thinner, stranger. The tear is a lens of purple-black that looks like the absence of forgiveness. It skims the atmosphere and leaves a burning wake far east beyond the sea. The Emperor's face turns. Another stress line, he says. It slips out. He had meant to stay quiet. His left hand opens and a constellation of sigils blooms above his palm. Gold loops intersecting like orbits, then folding into a tight lattice. Bulma is close enough to see it. She stops at the edge of the plaza, throws a capsule, and her mobile lab pops out in a puff of white smoke and clink metal. I'm Bulma Briefs, she says, chin high. Capsule Corporation. Welcome to West City. Please do not explode anything. We have homes here. I will not, he says and means it. She follows his gaze to the distant smear. Her visor pings, long-range satellites catching the tail of a fading pressure scar. Weird. That feels like, anti-energy. Not Hakai, but family. He raises an eyebrow at a word that fits nothing in his lexicon. Explain. You show me yours, I show you mine, Bulma says, then takes in a cathedral of a man who makes the word emperor make sense and adjusts. We have a god who deletes things. He is very sleepy until dessert. The energy over there tastes like his cousins. The Emperor evaluates the map of power she sketched in 9 words. Destroyer, angel, bureaucracy of annihilation. He has faced gods with titles like that, but not their manners. Then your world is under a particular sovereign, he says. I will ask leave to stand before him. Ask, Bulma repeats, then laughs softly. That would be a first. Before she can say more, 3 Kai signatures snap into a high arc from Mount Paozu's direction. Krillin, Android 18, and Piccolo, arriving on discipline vectors. Piccolo hangs back, taking perimeter atop a lamp tower. 18 is cool and measured, eye scanning the Emperor like she scans a hard fight. Krillin lands nearest, the disc of his oldest courage tight in his chest. You okay, Bulma? Krillin asks, a half step forward, palms out. Sir, hi, welcome to Earth. If you're peaceful, you're our favorite kind of visitor. We can walk and talk. Walk and talk, the Emperor echoes, and then his head lifts as the air tells him about a new pressure. The purple lens he marked is not gone. It's sliding, hugging the planet's curve, and it will clip a coastal city if it dives. It isn't malicious. It's physics with a cruel accent. He does not run. He folds displacement like paper. The golden corona twists and unfurls, and he is suddenly hundreds of kilometers east, standing in air that holds him out of respect. His mind reaches ahead, maps the incoming shear as if he were putting a hand through a stream and feeling where the current will bruise. He makes a wall that is not a wall. It's an instruction. You may fall, but not here. The shear peers at that impossible sentence and breaks itself understanding it. On a hill outside the coastal city, fishermen look up from their mended nets in time to see a ring of foam run outward like the planet exhaled. It reaches the breakwater, kisses it, and dies. The Emperor lets his shoulders ease, then winces. Not from the force he abated, but from the meter that lives behind his sternum, ticking up. Conversion load, 26%. Entropy leak, 3%. Acceptable for now. He returns to West City in the time it takes a stray leaflet to flip once in a hot breeze. Okay, Bulma says, jotting on her tablet with a stylus moving like a fencer's blade. Your barrier didn't look like Kai, but it held like Ki. Capsule readouts show no shockwave in the surviving amplitude bands, and you just teleported. Instant transmission. Different, Piccolo murmurs. He's listening to the quiet around the Emperor, and the quiet is listening back. He didn't move. The world moved out of respect. Android 18 studies the little residue coil still fading in the air. It's not Kai, but it rhymes with it, and it's eating him a little. The Emperor inclines his head at the clear-eyed reed. Everything worth doing costs. Krillin rubs the back of his neck. You sound like Goku when he's trying to make fighting into a lesson, except you use big words and a cape. Where is the one called Goku? The Emperor asks, because he mapped the energy lattice of this world when he landed and saw a star missing. Training, Bulma says. Off-world. Same with Vegeta. Which is why I am very motivated to keep Earth in one piece until they get back. Noted, the Emperor says. He turns his hand, and the golden lattice above his palm resolves into a finer model of the planet and the moving stress lines that remain. He sets small weights in places where the crust's temper wants to crack. They are prayers written axiomatically. Codex note. The Candelabra Protocol transmutes foreign soul kinetic vectors, Ki, to compliant psychoenergetics via a 12-branch warp orthogonal lattice at the user's endurance cost. Up in the Kaioshin realm, Shin's hands twist. He is writing on the air, he whispers. Like a Kai, but not. He thinks we should have done this already. Kipito bristles, but he cannot deny the efficacy. Lord Supreme Kai, if this being is a god from elsewhere, we must consult the angel. Far beyond the simple blue sky, Whis opens one eye above a staff that shows him West City, as if it were a jewel in a palm. He smiles. Yes, Lord Beerus, I think we've been invited to dessert. Beerus sleeps like a dangerous volcano as always, but the ripple of a new flavor teases his nose. He sniffs. A line forms between his brows. That's scent, not food. He sits up, ears tilting toward a direction not measured in distance. A strong thing arrived, strong and insolent. Was muses, already turning the staff to point toward the blue planet. If it breaks your nap, that's rude. Shall we go teach it manners? Beerus smiles like a knife peeking from silk. After pudding, Bulma's tablet buzzes with a priority alert she should not have access to. She glances down, sees the angel's signature through hacked otherworld channels, and swears. Heads up, our destroyer might be on his way. If he arrives hangry, we're in trouble. I will make formal contact, the Emperor says. He does not reach for weapons because his weapons are vows. He does unfurl a fraction of his mind toward the far distant chill, where the destroyer's attention will sharpen. He finds a place to anchor etiquette there. Formal, Krillin repeats, sweating. With Beerus, right. Android 18 tilts her head. Do you do diplomacy? I do necessary things, the Emperor says. Traffic resumes incautious fits and starts. People flow around the plaza as if it were a rock in a river that might be hot. A robot dog bumps the Emperor's boot, recalibrates its courage and sits. The Emperor rests his hand on its steel head without looking down, and the dog's internal debugging processes resolve. Question, Bulma says. Your entry hit like a meteor, but you buffered us mid-fall. That means you either knew exactly how the atmosphere would behave here, or you have instinctual control at a level I'd love to patent. I watch your clouds, he says. I learned the taste of your gravity. I asked this world if I could stand. That's poetry, big guy, Krillin says under his breath. Piccolo's eyes cut to the east again. The second lens you addressed. Do you see more? I see the edges of a pattern. The Emperor's eyes unfocus for an instant. Your cosmos is administered by powers who understand deletion. My arrival induced stress. Those powers responded, not cruelly, but with a test. The test did not kill your people only because I spoke the right sentence at the right time. We call that a Tuesday, Bulma says. But thank you for the sentence. Laughter bubbles along the edges of fear. Humans are like that. They plant humor where craters might go. The Emperor allows a tiny smile, then dims it as another weight lands at the edge of his awareness. A pair of presences arrive with the weight of etiquette so heavy it makes the air want to kneel. Two long shadows lengthen and stop at the exact distance where an insult becomes an audience. Whis touches down with the ease of a feather deciding where to land. Beerus descends more like a verdict tossed from a balcony. His eyes sweep the plaza, find Bulma, find the Emperor, and narrow. "Hello, Bulma," Whis sings, already smiling at the pudding cup she's holding. "May I?" "Please," Bulma says, because she understands leverage and miracles both. Beerus ignores the pudding. "You," he says to the Emperor, a simple pronoun loaded with the instinctive grammar of destruction. "You smell like a story that refuses to end." "I am a story that insists on purpose," the Emperor says. He does not kneel, he does not bow. He inclines his head the exact angle owed to a sovereign of a domain, and no more. Murmurs ripple through the crowd like minnows. Android 18 shifts half a step to the side, creating a line that says, "If this becomes force, she will not be in anyone's pocket." Whis takes a spoonful of pudding and hums. "Delightful. So, introductions. Lord Beerus, God of Destruction for Universe 7. And you?" "I am the Emperor of Mankind," he says. "I crossed an impossible distance to learn whether your key can redeem a war mine cannot yet win. I paid for the crossing. I will pay more if I must." Beerus's ears twitch. "Redeem a war. You have enemies there." He points vaguely past the sky, a lazy gesture that could nonchalantly erase a moon. "And you think what is ours should be yours?" "What is yours is not mine to take," the Emperor says. "But I would learn, and I would offer equivalence." "Equivalence," Beerus says, tasting the word like it might have a flavor worth destroying. "What will you do if I say no?" "Go elsewhere," the Emperor says, "or die trying to convince you." Bulma coughs softly. "We're doing honesty today. Great." Whis' smile edges thoughtful. "And what price have you paid already, Emperor?" He meets the angel's pale gaze without flinching. "A leak," he says simply, and the lattice of golden light over his heart flickers for an instant like a candle in a sudden draft. He locks it down. Small now, larger, later. Beerus senses the vulnerability. He prowls a single step, and his presence tightens every throat within sight. "If your crossing damages my universe, I erase you," he says. "No fury, just policy. And if your erasure endangers my purpose," the Emperor says, "I resist." Silence draws tighter, then breaks, as Krillin, of all people, says, almost apologetic, Bulma, maybe we take this indoors?" The plaza's had a big day. Whis taps his staff once. A clean space unfolds nearby, like a small courtyard cut out of the world and tucked to a pocket. Warm stone, a low table, cushions, and the kind of calm that lets ears stop ringing. A neutral venue, Whis says. Tea, pudding, words. Beerus accepts because he enjoys staging. The Emperor accepts because he respects architectures of order. Bulma accepts because her city needs the optics. Inside the pocket court, the world seems to hold its breath and listen. Bulma sets the pudding like an offering. Whis pours tea that tastes like mountain morning. Beerus sits like a blade behind soft upholstery. The Emperor stands until he assesses the geometry of politeness and lowers himself to a cushion that does not squeak. Terms, Beerus says. He gestures with 2 fingers, a sovereign shorthand for cut to the meat. I came to audit a principle, the Emperor says. Your people train breath and will into power. They keep that power personal. My war is against predators who live on belief turned rancid. I would port a fragment of your principle into my war, so that my people may fight without feeding the very thing they resist. Bulma leans forward despite herself. You want to turn Ki into a kind of vaccine against, what, corruption? A disciplined flame against rot, the Emperor says. Yes. Beerus is bored of human-scaled metaphors. Show me, he says. The Emperor lifts a hand to request consent from the space. Whis tips his head. Go on. The Emperor touches 2 fingers to the air and draws a tiny loop of light that refracts the court's quiet into a faint glow. He breathes out not Kai, but something that offers Ki a covenant. A kernel forms, bright but not hungry. Piccolo, outside, looks up like a prayer has just learned his name. Dende, far above, gasps and grips the railing. Corrin squints. Huh. Beerus extends a claw and taps the kernel. It hums, resilient, not defiant. It's not Kai, he says. Adjacent. This is an insult. He smiles, almost pleased. Insults should be punished. Whis' spoon pauses over pudding, then resumes its journey. Lord Beerus, he says lightly, remember the city. Beerus' eyes cut to the Emperor. I do remember the city, he says, and I am thinking about what would happen if I erased it in front of you. The court goes so quiet. The idea of sound seems rude. The Emperor's golden light contracts dangerously. I would stop you, he says. No threat in it, just a simple line he will not step back from. Bulma sets her stylus down. Lord Beerus, she says, choosing her words like they come with a price tag. West City makes excellent pudding. Beerus' ear flicks. He's not immune to leverage. Fine, he sighs, as if he just spared a planet to avoid indigestion. I will not erase your toy while I taste your food, but your presence is a stress. So here is a plan. You will confine your power. You will not teach. You will make your case to those who judge such things. Who judges? The Emperor asks. Whis smiles with his eyes. At the least, the Supreme Kais. At the most, my father. Bulma looks between them and then up toward a sky she has never seen with anything but human eyes. So clarity. Our big cats are taking our new friend to the gods to get stamped. I love a permit process. The Emperor nods once. I accept preliminary limits. I will not spread my method. I will stabilize the stress lines I caused. And I will stand where I am told until your judgment. Beerus watches him for the slightest quiver of ego. The Emperor's pride has no quiver. It's a broad, unadorned road. He finds that offensively steady. Good. If you refuse later, we fight. If we fight, I obliterate you. If I fail to obliterate you, I obliterate your idea. Understood, the Emperor says. His golden lattice dims to a subtler geometry. His internal meter ticks. Suppression is a cost too. Outside the pocket court, life remembers how to be loud. By the gate, Krillin exhales a breath he had been storing for later. Android 18 glances at the sky, calculating vectors if this goes to red in a heartbeat. Piccolo looks at the Emperor and thinks about the shape of mercy when held by a hand that can crush stars. Bulma pockets her tablet. Okay, she says. Next problems. You erased a shockwave, which was very polite. But there are after tremors, little ones. And Satellite 3 pinged a weird oceanic anomaly, like something tunneled under the crust and decided to nap. The Emperor stands. I will address it. He places 2 fingers against the air again and opens a view. The ocean's darkness resolves into a sinuous wake of pressure where something massive passed and then coiled. Sea King, Krillin offers. because this world has a habit of mixing the sublime with the ridiculous. No, Piccolo says, voice low. Something from elsewhere. Something that smelled the breach and came close to see what the light tasted like. Curious, Whis murmurs. Not malicious. Curiosity scales, Beerus says. If it keeps scaling and becomes troublesome, I erase it. The Emperor looks at the city one more time. The way sunlight finds windows at 20 different angles. The way a father holds his toddler like the world is balanced there. The way fear and humor tangle into a rope humans use to pull themselves through the day. And nods. I will make a net, he says. He steps into the sky. The corona around him thins and spreads into lines that reach for the bones of the world and hook there gently. He writes axioms on currents. The axioms are small and precise. Be calm here. Forget to surge here. Turn aside here. Remember that you do not want to break anything that sings. The ocean's pulse smooths. The anomaly curls in on itself and drifts away. Bored. His meter climbs. 31%. Leak 5. He pushes the leak down with the mind of a man who has held 1,000 dying suns and refuses to count this as one of them. Back in the pocket court, Beerus's tail flicks twice, thinking. You are strong, he says. Not admiring, just accurate. Strong at holding, strong at denying. Those are traits I prefer in walls more than guests. Walls stand between harm and those who cannot stop it, the Emperor says. If your office is to destroy, mine is to insist there will be someone left worth saving. Insist, Beerus repeats. The word amuses him. He is a creature who has never insisted without also succeeding. We will see, which closes the court with a tap. The plaza's heat rushes back in. The world's mess returns, the way it always does when gods go somewhere else and the city has to clean up its own chairs. Bulma inhales, tastes adrenaline and sugar and the metallic tang of possible futures, and nods to herself. Capsule Corp will host logistics, she declares to no one in particular and everyone in reach. We'll need a clean room, a med bay, and a PR plan that says welcome responsible visitor instead of mysterious golden threat. Krillin grins despite the sweat. You say PR, I hear party. Android 18's mouth twitches. We'll need security, not in case he attacks, in case people do something stupid. Piccolo looks up toward the place where the court had hung like a lantern. And the gods, they'll watch, Bulma says. They always watch, but we can make watching boring. Or interesting, says a voice behind them. They turn. Shin stands at the edge of the plaza, Kibito at his shoulder. No one saw him arrive because he came the way thoughts arrive, suddenly necessary. He is smaller than the Emperor and infinitely more rattled. Supreme Kai, Piccolo says, respectful despite the fatigue tightening his spine. Shin bows slightly, gaze flicking to the Emperor and back. I am late, he says, and that is an indictment. Forgive me. He draws closer, palms open, and lets his own gentler light peel back the noise around the Emperor's aura, as if to examine a wound without prodding it. You are not of this cosmos, he says quietly, and yet you refuse to devour. That is unusual. It is deliberate, the Emperor says. Kibito levels a measuring look like a spear. Deliberate or not, you strain the fabric, anger the destroyer, invite predators. Predators already chew on your edges, the Emperor says, not unkind. I see them nosing at your bright places. You keep them back with ceremony and power. That is right. I can help without staying. Bulma smiles with all her practicality. Help while you're here, get judged, then decide next steps. We can do practical. We invented practical. We put it in capsules. Shin's mouth bends with something like a prayer disguised as a smile. We will convene, he says. Soon. For now, please confine your light. The Emperor lowers the corona another degree. The pavement under his boots looks relieved. His meter ticks steady at 32%. Leak holds at 5. The line will not hold forever, and he knows it. The math writes itself along his nerves. That night, where city sleeps badly and then better, the Emperor stands on a rooftop like an honest statue and listens to what the city thinks when it feels safe enough to think out loud. He hears lullabies and arguments, the click of a fan that needs oil, a kettle left on and turned off at the last second. He hears one boy whisper to his pillow, "He fixed my ice cream." He smiles without teeth. At 2 a.m, a Capsule Corp drone buzzes close with Bulma's signature on its firmware. It projects a small hollow over the roofline, a schematic of the Emperor's earlier lattice and Bulma's proposed modifications, annotated with 3 honest guesses and 1 wild one. "You mind if I learn from your math?" she asks through the drone, voice tired and sharp. "I mind only if you copy without caution," he replies, and the drone's receipt light blinks as if encouraged. "Caution is my middle name," Bulma lies cheerfully. "I want to build dampers that eat your shockwaves so you don't have to. Also, PR wants to know what to call you. Call me what you hear when your city calms," he says. Bulma snorts. "PR can't print poetry. Can I go with the Emperor? Or is that too on the nose?" "'Tis accurate," he says. He looks east, where dawn stains the low clouds, then west, where stars think slowly. And temporary. Morning breaks without catastrophe. News Chiron scroll. Mysterious Golden Guardian saves city. Who is he? Capsule Corp promises a press conference at noon. Footage of Beerus on the plaza trends for 6 minutes before a cat video eats its lunch. People who weren't there argue with people who were. Then they all go to work. At 11, the plaza fills again. Bulma stands at a podium she had in a capsule because, of course she did. Krillin and 18 stand in polite guard. Piccolo takes the high perch because the high perch is his nature. Dende watches from the lookout, feeling something like hope that isn't unearned. The Emperor steps into view without theatrics. Cameras like him whether he cares or not. He speaks simply. "I cross to ask a question about the way you breathe your strength. I will not endanger you. I will submit to your guardian's judgment. While I'm here, I will make the edges of your world smooth if they fray because of me." Reporters shout, because it is their job to turn grace into words. "Are you a god?" someone asks. "I'm responsible," he says. "Are you a threat?" "I'm a promise," he says, and then smiles because he knows that is exactly the answer that satisfies no one and everyone. Halfway through the conference, the sky turns the color of rule. Whis appears, staff in hand, kind as deceit. "Pardon the interruption," he says, every syllable gossamer. Scheduling. Beerus's presence follows like a bass note, arriving after a melody. He does not address the crowd. He looks at the Emperor. Time. The city shivers. Bulma sets down her notes. "We'll manage," she says. Krillin nods, like a man who has made peace with occasionally dying at work. Android 18 crosses her arms, which is affection disguised as geometry. Piccolo lowers his chin. The Emperor regards the crowd one more time. He sees how they square themselves, the way this world has learned dignity under absurd duress. He nods. "I will return," he says to no one in particular, and everyone at once, and then turns to Beerus as if walking into a court he can respect without surrender. Whis draws a line in the air with his staff. Space behaves. A corridor opens that looks like a prayer and a knife at once. The Emperor steps toward it and pauses. He sends 2 small revisions down into the crust, where his earlier dampers sit. Endure, then forget you are needed. He pays for that with a little more leak than the math predicted. He accepts the bill. "Let's go," Beerus says. already bored of exits. The corridor folds around them. West City breathes out, then in, then gets back to laying bricks, brewing coffee, making rent, mending things that can be mended. On the lookout, Dende closes his eyes. "Mr. Popo," he says, "I think today we met a wall. I hope it stands." And far below, in the ocean where the anomaly had drifted, something old and curious turns away. Not frightened, not quite sated, but content that for now, the world's song is sung by hands that mean it. The corridor is a polished blade. It cuts from a plaza full of cameras into a sky that is not a sky, where light arranges itself according to etiquette and distance is measured in permission. Whis hums a quiet note, and the passage smooths. Beerus walks like impatience given ankles. The Emperor moves with the still gravity of a mountain that decided to come along. Halfway through the corridor, reality hums wrong. Whis' staff shows a flicker below the root. A pocket of non-color advances through subspace like frost on a warm pane. Beerus' eyes narrow. "A residual," he says. "Hakai drift. Probably mine from last century. I was busy." The drift is not evil. It is an algorithm continuing to do what it was told, forever. It is sweeping toward a small blue-green planet, not Earth, but one with harbors and a temple that rings bells at noon, because bells feel like order. The sweep will erase the cathedral first, because it dead is tallest. "Permit?" the Emperor asks. Whis inclines his head, a host tolerating an eager guest. "Do keep it tidy." The Emperor steps sideways in a space that has no sideways. He arrives over the target world and tastes the structure of the drift. It refuses to be touched. His golden light dims and tightens. He considers letting it pass and saving what remains afterward. He rejects that because he has never trained himself to step aside and watch. Even when gods call it wisdom, he shapes a sentence with his will that Hakai understands. This is already finished. The drift hesitates, because destruction is also about endings, and the sentence is true in a small way that matters. He places a second sentence beside the first. "Go to the rest you have earned." The drift curls around the notion like a tired animal and loses edge. It still advances. It must. It was told to complete. He pulls Kai into the shape of breath. Not his. He has no key. He asks the planet below for a loan of its quiet. Farmers look up from their fields without knowing why they inhale deeply and exhale slowly, and the wind carries the pattern. The Emperor weaves that rhythm into a net that is not energy, but insistence. The drift drapes itself over it and finds itself ending in a way that feels complete. It erases itself by agreeing to be done. "Atakifes," the temple bells ring at noon. The sound reaches the Emperor as a simple joy. The pocket of non-color collapses with a sigh no one hears. Beerus tilts his head in the corridor. He did not authorize that. He is not offended. He is interested despite himself. Whis smiles into his sleeve. The Emperor rejoins the corridor. His meter clicks up. 41%. Leak 8. He seals the leak with layered breathwork that would make a martial artist suspect he studied with their teacher's teacher. He did not. He watched the wind and imitated humility. "Creative," Whis says, genuinely pleased. "You serenaded annihilation to sleep." "A sin completed cannot be undone," Beerus observes. "You turned it into a sin finished." He bares a tooth. "Do not do that to me." "I have no wish to end you," the Emperor says. They emerge above a world that is a park for a god who enjoys ruins and naps. Beerus's planet is a sphere with a single tree and a small palace made of curves and appetite. The air tastes like dessert about to happen. The horizon is close and private. Whis sets a tea service on nothing, and it rests as if the nothing were pleased. "We will call," he says, and taps his staff. The shine moves through the higher courts like a polite messenger. Kaoshin realm stirs. Otherworld shuffles forms. Somewhere very far away, a father, long used to being obeyed, glances toward Universe 7, with a tension that makes angels straighten their sashes. Bulma appears as a clean hologram above the tea tray. Her hair is pinned up in a style that says she left a meeting by walking through it. Capsule Corp remote online, she says. Hi everyone. Is this the part where we all pretend this is normal? Krillin's voice comes faintly from off-screen. Hi, Lord Beerus. Beerus ignores the projection. He pours tea like the ceremony bored him, and he made it interesting by doing it lazily. The Emperor declines a cup without insult. He cannot spare the posture to sip. His leak demands constant arithmetic. Shin and Kibito arrive in person, with a sound like a bell deciding to be serious. The Supreme Kai greets Whis, bows properly to Beerus, then turns to the Emperor with a calm made of braces and duty. We convene, he says. Let us not waste the time we may not deserve. They gather in a circle that is not quite a council, because Beerus refuses committees. Bulma's projection floats outside the ring like a reporter who happens to be family. Piccolo appears in a separate feed the size of Patience. Android 18 leans against a pillar in Capsule Corp and watches as if she is waiting her turn to hit something that deserves it. The Emperor sketches the Hakai Drift incident with enough detail to be useful and none to invite emulation. I used your world's breathwork as scaffolding, he says. It worked because destruction respects completion. Shin's eyes flicker. He sees the logic and its dignity. He also sees the precedent it sets. Mercy that teaches Erasure how to be tired is beautiful, he says softly. It is also a form of teaching. Bulma speaks before doctrine logs in. We're not talking about handing out God weapons. We're talking about dampers and nets. We're talking about quiet tools that help clean up cosmic litter so my kid can go to school. Kibito's mouth tightens. And when dampers become shields, and shields become spears, Piccolo steps into the space doctrine leaves. We steal manual worry, he says. If humans learn to move power outside their frame, they may cut themselves. If gods let a stranger teach new ways, the balance shifts. The cost could be arrogance dressed as hope. Android 18 lifts a brow. Steel man the other side, she says. We live on a planet that is the universe's favorite racetrack. We survive because we practice, and because our friends are stubborn. We don't need new gods. We need more ways to keep kids alive when the racetrack runs through their schoolyard. Shin does not bristle. He listens. Your courage is noted, he says. Whis stirs his tea like he is conducting moderation. Perhaps a compromise, he suggests. No teaching beyond physics, no metaphysics, no cultivation of this adjacent light you braid. But you may offer girders, things other minds can step on while you're here. The rest can be judged later. Beerus waves a hand bored and exact. I already told him. Confine himself. Confine the ideas. He can stabilize the mess he made. He can present a case. He cannot start a school. Bulma purses her lips. Fine. While you argue over cosmic zoning, I will build hardware that does only hardware things. Filters, dampers, vibration eaters. I learned 3 tricks just watching him ignore the rules. The Emperor inclines his head. We can make your devices less fragile. I will sign them with my patience. They will not draw attention from things that sniff for pride. Shin looks from human to God to intruder and back. He's not cruel. He's careful. We meet again at sundown, he says. I will bring the other Kais who still listen to reason. He almost smiles. That is 2. The council disperses enough to pretend it ended. Beerus drifts back toward his tree to take a nap or lean on dollars and think. Whis floats left of the Emperor, staff held like a harmless toy that can end worlds when he remembers. Your converter, Whis says conversationally. You starve it, it sulks. You feed it, it leaks. You patch it, it eats the patch. This is the interesting part. I expected worse, the Emperor says. It is not bragging. He expected to bleed in ways that cannot be bandaged. Bulma's projection steps closer, as if the hologram could cross the distance of power. When the council reconvenes, they'll ask for answers wrapped in numbers. I have some. We need more. Can you demonstrate, in a controlled environment, what happens when your light hits Beerus's erasure up close? Beerus opens one yellow eye from under a branch. No. Whis smiles. Yes, he says at the same time, because he has learned to translate no from his lord as not yet. I haven't enjoyed the build-up. The Emperor does not ask for a duel. He walks to a patch of ground that does not mind being a test bench and holds out a hand. His golden field pulls tight, then shapes a slender ring the size of a fist, no bigger. It rotates lazily, laminations sliding like pages in a book. It hums the way a promise hums when it has work to do. Beerus saunters forward, flexes a claw, and points. A bead of Akai blossoms at the tip, dark and too light at once. It moves toward the ring as if it had somewhere else to be, and will go through this on the way. The bead touches the ring. For a millisecond, the ring insists on definition. The bead does not care. It is not energy to be opposed, not pressure to be diverted, not intent to be persuaded. It is a function. The ring folds into fewer possibilities and then none. The bead continues. The Emperor cancels it with a thought he paid for in ache. Android 18 says what the martial artists are thinking in quieter words. That will kill you. Bulma's stylus scrapes hard enough to threaten the screen. Not if we make the ring not something, if we make it a rule. Piccolo nods once. Hakai erases states. You need a sentence that says no state. You need an absence that obeys you before it is erased. Whis applauds lightly, the sound intentionally frivolous. Very good. That is almost how Ultra Instinct handles murder. It lets the body be where the attack is not. You would ask your faith to be where destruction cannot find a foothold. The Emperor holds his hand flat. His skin is unburned because the thing that burns is not skin. Inside 2 inches behind the sternum, a hair-thin seam of pain opens and does not close. He does not touch it with his mind, because attention is food, and he will not feed it. Power scaling. Interlude. Hakai is not energy. It is an operator that maps existence to null across a bounded set. Warp constructs rely on amplitude and phase, things with states. Erasure removes the coordinate system, not the coordinate. The Emperor's converter translates breath rhythm into psychoenergetic assertions. Operators ignore assertions. To resist, he must prearrange a space where the operator has no domain. A null of his own that is sanctuary, not absence. This is possible, but every sanctuary costs a saint. Shin returns with 2 other Kais. Their robes look like doctrine remembered how to be cloth. They listen to Bulma's report, to Piccolo's analogies, to Whis's cool edits. Beerus pretends to nap and hears everything. The Emperor stands and does not elaborate beyond what lives between sentences. The discussion is not spectacle. It is work. It is chairs pulled close and hands that do not fidget. It is mercy asked to wear a uniform and policy invited to admit it. Envies mercy's courage. Kibito takes the hard line because someone must. We cannot permit the spread of any method that allows a foreign god to rewrite the way lives hold together. Even if he does not mean harm, injury follows ingenuity. Bulma nods like the strike scored. Agreed. So we write limits. Hardware only, as we said. Human run, not Emperor run. If it needs a will bigger than a planet to function, we don't build it. We put big red "Do not touch" labels where kids can see them. Piccolo raises a finger. And we refuse to make weapons. We make nets. We make ramps. We do not teach anyone to swing. If they already swing, we remind them to breathe. Shin lets the balance settle on the table between them. I hear your discipline, he says quietly. I also hear the universe we are actually in. We do not get to pretend it is gentler than it is. Beerus yawns with malice. You will draw predators with your kindness, he says. Voice sleep thick and blade thin. They smell generosity. They call it idiot's perfume. Whis' staff flickers. He looks up sharply. We have an intruder, he announces. A line appears in the sky over Beerus' world, where no line should draw itself without permission. It is not a tear. It is an arrival that refuses to pretend it used a door. A shape like a manta cut from absence slides through and unfolds. It is vast and flat and hungry for stories. It is not a creature. It is an appetite with contours. Shin's hand goes to his chest. A void archive, he says aghast. Ancient. They collect narratives by erasing what contradicts them. Beerus stands fully awake, delighted. Something came to eat my nap. The thing drifts toward the palace with the slow assurance of a glacier remembering its appointment. Wherever its shadow passes, definitions weaken. The cups on the tea tray consider not being cups. The palace walls debate their boundaries. The single tree loses a leaf and then time forgets it fell. Bulma's projection wavers and reasserts. That's not Earth, she says sharply. But it is going to touch things I like. The Emperor's golden light draws down to a hard, simple line at his shoulders. He lifts his hand and lowers it. He cannot make a wall big enough. Walls have states, and the manta eats states. He has to say a sentence the manta cannot erase because it lives in the grammar of what the manta is allowed to do. He steps up into the air, onto nothing that knows it can hold him, and walks toward the creature. It feels him like an argument. It dips. Do not erase, Beerus calls lazily. The tree. I will not, the Emperor says without looking back. Whis observes, staff bright. This is an excellent test. The void archive spreads, seeking contradictions to smooth. It will make this world consistent with its favorite story. The Emperor speaks into the math. Your story includes this tree. The manta's edge blurs where it touches the idea. It pauses. It does not like being told what it likes. Your story includes the cat, he adds, and the woman who makes pudding, and a blue planet with too many holidays. The manta's shadow roils. It has no mouth, and yet it communicates offense. It deflects, choosing to eat the path he walks because paths are easy. The Emperor's foot presses down on nothing and makes a mark the manta cannot smooth because he put the mark in before it tried. He pre-writes the future and steps into it, one deliberate stride at a time. He reaches the creature's belly. He lifts both hands, palms open, and gives it a thought. You came to collect one narrative. He tilts the thought like a mirror and shows it a better ending. You collected it. You are finished. It believes him because the belief does not flatter it. It slides backward, weightless, completed, annoyed. It turns into a crease in the sky and then into nothing, convinced it owns the story and therefore does not need to remain to enforce it. The teacups remember themselves. The tree remembers being alone in a sky too close to the ground. The Emperor's chest aches as if a blade of cold air slid between two old scars. Meter, 53%. Leak, 11. He breathes like a man hearing his own breath for the first time that day. Bulma lets out a noise engineers make when a bridge holds. That was clean, she says. No collateral, no new pressure waves. Shin presses his lips together in that particular mix of relief and theological headache. You convince predators their work is already accomplished, he says. That is mercy without arrogance. It is also a thesis. Beerus looks up at the tree, as if checking for one additional leaf. Acceptable, he says, which in his mouth is praise. Codex note. The narrative closure gambit reclassifies an erasure class threat as a terminal fulfillment, causing self-abatement. The efficacy depends on prior anchoring of protected states. They convene again under the shade, as if they have not just watched someone persuade hunger to nap. The line of their problem sharpens. This visitor can help. This visitor costs the space he occupies. This visitor teaches by breathing. First victory, Whis says with a twinkle mostly for himself. One must always mark a first victory. Kibito does not clap. We must also mark the first ideology clash, he says, as if printing a headline. Guardian who remakes rules by sentences versus guardians who preserve rules by blades. Piccolo glances up at the single tree. Preserving by blades requires a tree to cut down, so you can prove you knew where the blade was, he says mildly. He just did it with sentences. Both are honest methods. One leaves more shade. Shin nods as if the words set a stone in place inside him. Mercy versus survival, he says. Doctrine versus freedom. He looks at the Emperor. Your empire, does it allow souls to breathe? The Emperor does not flinch from the hard question. It allows vast numbers to live where otherwise there is only harvest for things that wear faces to fool the living, he says. It is not kind. It is necessary. I have cut without singing. I would rather teach breathing. Bulma puts it simpler. He leads a hard world. He wants a softer result without creating soft targets. We can work with that. Kibito's tone remains the hard edge of care. And if he fails, if in teaching breathing he opens lungs to things that drink breath, Whis flips his spoon. Then we will erase an idea and hope the erasure does not tear the tablecloth. Beerus stretches, spine cracking audibly like a mountain shifting. Enough counsel. The smarter foe is on its way, and I want to see if he bleeds in a color I haven't seen. Whis glances at his staff. He sees it too. Something followed the Emperor's scent through the corridor, not because it wanted to eat him, but because it wanted to edit him. He smiles, just a little. The Grand Minister sends a sign, he says smoothly, but the flicker behind his eyes says, this is not father. This is parallel malice. An eld erasure monk, an old office that predates dignified titles, who polices leaks by removing vessels that leak. It arrives as a ring of clear air that moves without making wind. It is small, hand-wide, and very fast. It slides toward the Emperor's chest with exquisite indifference. Android 18's eyes snap to it even in projection. Move, she says, knowing he cannot. He does not move. He is building something in his head that will either save him or teach Bulma why it failed. The ring reaches him. It does not touch skin. It touches the part of him that is made of obligations. Obligations have edges. Edges can be cut. He breathes, slow and exact, and brings up a prearranged emptiness he seeded with his name an hour ago when he fixed the ocean. He opens the emptiness like a door and invites the ring to pass through a place that does not exist on maps where erasure can work. The ring skates, loses definition, reappears behind him, still moving, insulted. Beerus's ears perk. Ah, he purrs. It did not bite. Try again. The ring curves. It returns, lower, like a snake that has learned kneecaps. The Emperor steps into the sanctified emptiness, rather than opening it in front of him, and the ring traces his outline without finding purchase. It hovers, curious. It is dumb and perfect. It is nearly a god. Piccolo's mouth thins. He can't keep that up, he says. That empty place he made isn't free. Whis nods. It is very expensive, he agrees. It costs him the part of him that could have filled itself with victory and instead empties. He will win, but he will not enjoy the win. Bulma scrawls with her stylus until the hologram threatens to smudge. I can build dumb versions of that. Siphons, bleed valves. We'll hero-proof them so no one can get clever. Shin's fingers curl. Do it, he says, surprising himself with his own permission. The ring darts again. The Emperor lets it pass through that curated nothing one more time and then closes the door. He throws a sentence behind it that sounds like bedding being shaken out. You completed the sweep. The ring slows, confused, and dissolves into air that tastes tired. His meter climbs, 61%. Leak, 14. Sweat breaks cold at his hairline. The body remembers even when the saint ignores. Beerus stares with interest he rarely grants. If I punch you later, he says, this will go very badly for you. Yes, the Emperor says, but I will still stand where I must. Shin's gaze softens despite himself. You refuse the easier righteousness, he says. You choose the harder one. The afternoon drifts toward a court that will be higher than this one. Whis receives a pulse from a place where hierarchies crystallize. Prepare, he says softly. Father will not let this pass without comment. His staff paints a route up and out towards the galleries where decisions wear smiles and slippers. Before they go, Bulma's projection brightens. One more practical, she says, brisk, to hide the tremor at the edge of her voice. Earth has small rips where your entry pressed. I can keep bootstrapping dampers, but we need a fast proof. Can you give me a field demonstration on-world with consent so I can calibrate? Beerus sighs, offended at logistics. Do it and leave, he says. If the blue planet pops because of your homework, I will be cross. Whis raises a finger. We schedule 10 minutes. We supervise. They tear a short corridor back to West City. The plaza is cleaner, the gossip thicker, the fear thinner. Bulma gesticulates her real hands on the real podium now. Piccolo hands a microphone to a harried civil engineer who did not expect his day to include addressing gods. Android 18's eyes scan rooftops that might grow problems. The Emperor stands in the square where he landed and raises his hands without drama. Consent, he says. He explains in 10 clean sentences what he intends. A net that will sit in the cracks he made, not using any person, not drawing from any one life, weaving only the clean breath rhythm Bulma's devices will emit if citizens choose to carry them. People nod because they want to be helpful and because his voice makes complicated things feel like they can be stood under without ducking. He builds the net in public. He calls to winds, not wills. He anchors the mesh to lampposts and storm drains, gift-wrapped in quiet, so spirits who hate noise will leave it alone. He uses Namekian cadences he learned by listening to Dende sing to seeds in spring. He uses capsule core frequencies that Bulma hacked out of the sky with soft knuckles. It locks in with a hum no ear hears, and every brick appreciates. The shallow rips tighten and fade like a healed cut. A child runs into the plaza with a kite that catches on nothing because the net isn't there for kites. The kite dips, then climbs. The child laughs at the right time, which is all an engineer needs to know. The meter ticks, 66%. Leak 16. The Emperor does not flinch at the climb. He adjusts his posture by half a prayer and hides the ache the way soldiers tuck pain under their belts when their belts already carry too much. Whis nods. Shin exhales, then pretends he did not. Beerus eats a pastry Bulma slipped him, so he would not erase the cook for overhearing an argument. Reporters attempt to turn this into a narrative with angles. The Emperor refuses angles. He thanks the city for the loan of its breath, and bows to a level that says respect, not worship. Piccolo's mouth lifts half a degree, which for him is a cheer. Android 18's gaze softens a fraction before remembering itself. They turn to go. The sky goes wrong. It is not a tear. It is not drift. It is not hunger. It is a clean, deliberate null that carves a circle around the plaza with geometric precision. Humans do not notice at first. The wind notices. It cannot cross the line. Dust at the edge behaves as if forgotten. Bulma's instruments scream. "Zone," she barks. "Null zone." Whis' eyes sharpen. "This is new," he says, which in his mouth means very old. A compliance test. Beerus' tail lashes once. He recognizes father's handwriting. Validate stability. If the visitor can operate under erasure, he might be allowed to speak. The circle contracts. It is not here to kill. It is here to delete the idea of nets and see what remains. Anything that relied on assertion will not survive this circle. The Emperor does not move. He unhooks his net from the plaza's systems with a thought that feels like apology. He refuses to let the test erase the city's breath. He stands alone in the circle with his light tucked tight around him and watches as the null kneads his work into smoothness. When it reaches his boots, it tries to remove the notion of standing. He introduces a different notion: witnessing. Witnessing is not a state. It is an attention. The circle processes and lets it pass. It reaches his chest and tries to erase the converter itself. He remembers a younger self under a mountain in a storm that had no sky. He remembers choosing. He anchors the converter to that choice, and the circle discovers it cannot erase what was not made, but was. He lifts his hands in surrender to a judge and lowers them as a craftsman who will continue working when court ends. The circle completes and fades. The plaza remains a plaza. The nets are gone. The stress lines do not reopen. The child's kite dips and climbs again. Power scaling. Interlude. The null zone is a bounded test from an authority that does not break furniture before it knows it must. It strips constructs that declare themselves. The Emperor survives by refusing to declare. He reduces himself to witness and choice, axioms prior to structure. It hurts because bodies want names. Bulma checks her screen and closes her eyes. Devices unaffected, she reports. They're dumb. They eat wobbles. They don't declare. We're good. Shin bows his head, a small nod of institutional gratitude toward an intruder who passed a test as if he had trained for it for centuries in a different language. "We ask you now to ascend," he says. "Judgment is ready to begin." Beerus' smile is slow and anticipatory. "And after that," he says, not to the Emperor, but about him, "we see if he can bleed where I point." The Emperor glances one last time at West City. He watches Bulma direct a team to install boxes beneath benches that hum nothing and keep cracks quiet. He watches Krillin teach a teenager how to sit without slouching so the breath goes clean. He watches Piccolo stand where the high wind loves him. He watches Android 18 text her kid to buy milk and not run. He watches life insist. He steps into Whis' corridor, not as a guest now, but as a problem to be solved with rules. The path climbs towards rooms that keep the rest honest. The leak whispers like a faucet in a house at night. He lets it whisper. He chooses to hear the bell at noon on the other world a second time and rests his hand on that sound as if it were a railing. Behind them, in the plaza, someone sets the first dampers into the concrete of a curb and writes with a marker on the inside of the metal cover. "Breathe." A worker who will never meet a god reads it and smiles because somebody remembered his lungs. Whis' corridor climbs and thins until it is more etiquette than tunnel. The air tastes like polished rules. Above and below, Rooms of law drift past like lanterns that judge. The leak inside his chest counts quietly, an unwanted metronome between ribs. He sets the sound aside and keeps his eye on the next door. Shin briefs as they walk. He is not a warlord. He is a gardener who learned to hold knives. Beerus does not punch, he says. He ends. When he plays at punching, it is charity. When he becomes bored with charity, Hakai moves. Hakai cannot be blocked because it does not travel, it insists. It is an order delivered by a sovereign to reality itself. Whis adds the clean edge. You survive the null zone by refusing to be a declaration. In a fight, you have to act. Acting creates states. States can be erased. The Emperor nods. Then I must act with things earlier than states. Choice, witness, mercy. Those can be enacted without naming. Kibito looks ready to hate the phrase and finds it harder than he wants. Your semantics will not make you faster, he says. You must also move. Beerus stops, stretches, and points at the endless space beside the corridor. There, he says. Arena. The void hears him and becomes an empty plane of grey glass that does not reflect anything, because nothing here dares imitate him. A horizon lines itself up out of respect. Bulma's projection blinks into being at the rim. She looks like a scientist trying not to look like a mother. Android 18 stands in the capsule lab with her jaw at a steady angle that would shame a metronome. Piccolo folds his arms, then lets them fall loose. Tightness wastes oxygen, which draws the line in the air that makes a duel civilized. Terms, he says. No collateral. No erasing anything not within the ring unless both agree. First to kneel, withdraw, or be judged unfit by father's sign, ends the bout. Beerus looks at the Emperor with the mild warmth of a cat seeing a red dot. This will be brief. The Emperor does not answer. He is counting prayers he can afford to burn. Whis lowers the staff. The ring opens. Beerus moves without appearing to move. 1 second, he is 5 paces away. The next, he is inside the Emperor's guard with a hand on his shoulder like a brother correcting posture. The Emperor's cape blooms, sliced into a curl by a pressure line so thin it does not wake air. The floor forgets there was a scuff where he stood. The Emperor reaches with the mathematics of breath and writes the scuff. He accepts the cut. He turns his shoulder under the god's hand and lets his weight become a sentence with no verb, so the hand finds nothing to push. He counters with a palm toward Beerus's chest. No strike, a placement, as if to give the god a coordinate and take it away once he learns what it is made of. Beerus smiles and erases the coordinate mid-offer. The Emperor's hand lands on nothing and learns how null tastes. The lesson runs up his arm like icy wire. He steps wide and down, not back, and writes a rule on his boots. You exist because people trust floors. The floor agrees and holds. 2 beats into the bout, the Emperor knows how this will go if he lets it. He will be cut into options and then told those options never existed. He shortens the field, not with light, with witness. He brings the world closer by refusing to see beyond 5 paces. Everything outside 5 paces is not denied. It is deferred. His mind stops making targets larger than that. The ring obliges by feeling smaller. Beerus notices the change and likes it. You made your own dojo, he says, almost approving. The Emperor steps inside the 5 paces and speaks 1 word into the god's reach. Later, Beerus's right hand snags on the word a hair's breadth in space, as if time miscounted. The Emperor uses the miscount to place the heel of his hand near Beerus's jaw and fold intent into a sanctified nudge that does not break bone, does not bruise, but reminds bodies that gravity is a promise. Beerus's head turns and his eyes light like knives. The next minute is angles. Beerus slides blades of erasure through space that part like silk. The Emperor moves inside holes he wrote earlier for emergencies he never named out loud. Each time Beerus tags him, it is not a burn, not a bruise. It is a subtraction, a jog in his field, a bright notch in the golden light that does not fill when he wills it. The notches don't bleed, they steal verbs. At the 5th exchange, Beerus takes more than light. He flicks 2 fingers and erases a syllable. It is not a word the Emperor speaks. It is a word the world uses when it introduces him. He staggers. His lattice lurches. For an instant, he is only a tall man in grief. Whis' spoon stops halfway to his mouth. "Wound channel," he says for the record. "Name sever." Shin's knuckles whiten. Can he still be himself? Bulma's projection goes pixel soft and angry. He will be, because he decides he is. Even if the grammar is wrong, she says. The Emperor breathes one perfect breath and chooses himself without names. The lattice crawls back around the white notch like bark around a bolt. The syllable does not return. He keeps moving, now bearing a hole that does not hurt until he remembers it. Beerus grins, delighted to find a new way to be cruel. He does not throw Hakai full in the face. That would be waste. He paints the air with invisible erasures the width of flute reeds and moves the Emperor into them with careless nudges that look like kindness. Every time the Emperor corrects, another reed sings through his field and turns a tiny part of him into a pause. He shifts tactics. He writes nothing. He does not anchor. He does not assert. He becomes insistence without signature. His hands find arcs that are not techniques, but reflections. He places his palm on Beerus' sternum and gives him a sentence about tomorrow. Beerus does not recognize the grammar and steps back as if it smells like patience. The pause buys him 3 heartbeats. Beerus stops playing. A mote of Hakai blossoms on his thumb. It is pea-sized and absolute. He flicks it toward the Emperor's shoulder to see which shoulder he cares about. The Emperor opens his curated emptiness and lets the bead fall through where it cannot count. He pays for it with a shiver down his spine that feels like a decade leaving. He closes the door. He cannot open it again without leaving more than time in the doorway. Beerus nods, savoring. "You prepared bones in your shadow," he says. "Good. Let's break other bones." They both escalate. The Emperor laces breath rhythm across his forearms, creating not shields but edits, time slices where his limbs have already moved. He steps into the past he just wrote and arrives where Beerus is not. He throws no punch. He conjures no blade. He places a thought at the god's back. "You do not need to win here." Beerus laughs. The laugh is a small, sublime disrespect. "I want to," he says, and wanting is enough for him to keep going. He blurs. The pause that look like soft insults become comet ends and acoustics. He kicks without lifting his leg and erases the space the Emperor planned to use for breath. The Emperor chokes on nothing. He writes air back in with a prayer to the ocean he calmed, and the ocean lends him damp cool under his tongue. They clash. The plane that refuses to reflect has to admit they are on it. It prints marks and tries to forget. The marks return, unafraid. Beerus opens his palm, and the air between his fingers turns into 5 lines of decline. He closes his hand and all 5 lines travel. The Emperor cannot avoid them all. He gives 3 places he can afford, takes 2, and his field pinwheels with holes that do not close. 1 cuts through the converter's casing where it is most elegant. The leak surges like a held river, deciding it is time. He drops to one knee, only for an instant. The grey plane loves him for being honest enough to kneel. Beerus steps in to finish while the idea of kneeling still holds him. He will erase the converter, not out of strategy, but to see how the world looks when the tall man becomes only light and will and no longer a plan. Temptation arrives at that angle because it knows the place inside him that would do anything to be only will. It is not a voice. It is an arrangement of ease. It is a future where he signs a contract with angels, the order of destruction's perfection, not with blood, but with the part of himself that hates mess. It offers to remake him as a function, the wall of walls. No leak, no grief, no self. No more imperial cruelty either, because there would be no person left to be cruel. There would only be the doctrine that saves the most at the cost of choice. It tastes clean. It smells like an operating theatre that has never cut a living thing. It says, become function, and you can carry all of them on your back forever. He could accept for the length of a blink and let it calcify. He could win every argument by no longer having one. He does not accept. He does not argue. He refuses. Refusal is not a state either. It is a door that does not open. Refusal costs. The bead on Beerus's thumb touches the converter, not as erasure, but as exposure. The casing is now more idea than matter. Idea is easy to cancel. Hakai finds the elegance and eats it like sugar. The converter survives because he slams it shut and bolts it to the part of him that came out of caves. But the casing warps. Light leaks sideways with a wet hiss. Golden radiance turns thin and pale near his heart. The meter leaps. 74%. Leak. 21. The holes no longer pretend to be fine. He stands before he is ready, because standing is the only way the people who are watching will hold themselves together. Beerus stops with his hand lifted, a small shared courtesy between soldiers. He honors those who stand when they should lay down. They resume. The Emperor does not hide what is happening inside him. He lets the damage be seen, so that Bulma can learn, so that Shin can pray and mean it, so that Whis can mark the angles where the Grand Priest will place the test. He does not waste winds on vanity. Beerus throws a lazy backhand that erases 3 plans and leaves the body intact. The Emperor lets the plans die. He makes a new plan that does not require the erased ones to have existed. He walks into the space between minutes and pulls a thread of Noonbell from a world that survived his earlier mercy. He wraps it around his left wrist and lets the sound run down his arm, into the palm he places against Beerus's shoulder. The god of destruction feels a bell at noon in a place that is not his. It rings exactly once inside his sternum. He pauses not from pain, but from surprise, because surprise is rare and therefore valuable. The Emperor uses that instant to push Beerus back 2 steps by reminding him that everyone else matters. It is not much. It is enough to turn a kill into another chapter. Whis watches with the small smile of a teacher watching a student refuse a wrong answer, even though it would make the exam easier. Shin has tears he will deny later. Bulma presses the screen so hard she leaves fingerprints for tomorrow's her to curse. Beerus's smile returns. "You are interesting," he says. And interesting is the only reason he has not ended kings. He gathers more destruction than a city can understand, into a point that a god calls moderate and a man calls final. He becomes work. He steps in. Whis lifts the staff. Every person in the audience feels the shift before it happens, because Whis chooses to share it. It is not intervention in the fight. It is a bell rung in judgment halls. Father's attention focuses. The staff hums with the authorization for 3 minutes of rewind if the cat refuses to hear. Whis does not use it. He shows it. Beerus looks at the staff and at the man in front of him, and the holes in that man's light, and the noon bell wrapped around his wrist, and the mark where a syllable used to live. He lowers his hand with petulance disguised as grace. "Enough," he says. "The court expects us alive." The ring closes. The plane forgets it hosted anything important and is grateful. Bulma's projection blurs at the edges with relief. Medical, she says aloud out of habit, and then smiles at herself because the patient is a god wearing vows. Android 18 exhales through her nose. Piccolo closes his eyes as if he can store this hour where words cannot damage it. The Emperor remains standing because if he sits down, he will not rise in time to make the next choice. He looks at the hole where his name used to sit and nods to it like to an old enemy granted a chair by the fire under truce. Beerus leans, bored with the absence of finishing. If you had accepted my father's perfection, you would be very useful, he says without malice. You did not, but you are still useful. His eyes flick to the leak. If you spread, I end you. I will not spread, the Emperor says. He holds the converter's warped casing with will that tastes like stone. Codex note. Namesever erasure attacks the narrative anchor of a title. Unmitigated, it causes identity drift, cascade failure of oath-linked structures, and functional loss of converter casing integrity under erasure adjacent operators. The sacred sign arrives without trumpets. A small sigil prints itself in light above Whis's staff, high and simple. The Grand Priest does not speak. He never wastes words when a single shape can accomplish humiliation and invitation. The shape says, "Come and be weighed." Shin bows with relief and dread braided together. "The council will sit," he says. "You will have the three paths. You will choose." Bulma's projection draws closer, softer now that the cameras are fewer. "Before you go," she says, "let me borrow the damage." She holds up 2 fingers as if pinching a thread. "I want to tune the dampers to the noise you're leaking. If we can match the hiss, we can hide you from things that sniff for accidents." He lowers his chin once. The golden field loosens enough for her instruments to hear the wrong notes. She catches them like a tailor listening to cloth rip and writes a pattern into 3 devices down on Earth that are designed to be stupid and stubborn. The devices hum like refrigerators in a kitchen that feeds a family. They do not declare anything. They simply chew a tone and input warmth into the floor. "You bleed," Bulma says. "We eat the sound. No metaphysics, just rude engineering." "Thank you," he says, and means thanks for more than tools. Shin steps closer. His hand hovers over the hole in the Emperor's light and stops because he will not lay doctrine on a wound like a brand. "You refuse the easy absolution," he says. "Good." The Emperor nods once. He will feel the cost later when there is time he can spend on pain. For now, he catalogues the new edges, a syllable missing that makes certain sentences ring wrong. A casing warped, increasing leak under stress. A sanctuary door that is harder to open without paying years. He writes these on the inside of a habit he calls caution. Whis gestures and the corridor reasserts itself around them like a polite host, returning to collect guests who have lingered long enough to make the staff nervous. Beerus walks with humming contentment. He did not finish, but he fed an appetite rarer than hunger. The angel floats, listening to rooms far away where a father lifts his eyebrows. They pass a balcony where soul police argue with scheduled spirits, and everyone pretends they cannot smell familiarity coming off the tall man. They pass a room where a small godfall's paper cranes out of weather and does not look up because looking up would be to admit the perimeter is compromised. They pass temptation again, drifting like an aftertaste, a world without self, without rot, without story. He ignores it and it fragments because it cannot hold without a host. The corridor dips. The Emperor feels the universe choose to call this downward, even if down is not a meaningful word here. It is a courtesy granted to creatures who like strata. Shin offers the smallest, most human of preparations. "There will be doors," he says. "We will go through them and be polite even when politeness feels like a punishment. They will test your breath with words. They will try to make choices look like crimes." "Kai," the Emperor says. Would you like me to kneel when I enter? Shin draws back slightly, startled. He has never met a being who asked him how to be humble. Stand, he says. If they want kneeling, they'll ask. If they ask, kneel because you respect the house, not because you yield yourself. Understood, the Emperor says. Bulma's projection lingers for one last selfish second. Hey, she says, light and exhausted. Go do politics. I'll keep the kids breathing. He looks down at the planet that is not his and nods to the city that let him arrive. The mountain that lent him rhythm. The ocean that traded him cool for patience. And the women and men and children whose nets will not be praised by gods and will not be noticed when they hold. The corridor opens onto a wider hall that is not ornate, because ornament would admit vanity, and the beings who own this place do not admit. The light is equal, the floor is serious. The personnel are smiles with hands. Grand Priest stands where all roads pretend they intended to end. Angels line the ranks like punctuation that is not optional. Beerus straightens just enough, which makes his staff play silence. The Grand Priest regards the Emperor with an expression that is either approval for refusing an easy mistake, or approval for making a hard one. It is hard to tell with fathers. Welcome, he says, voice soft like the first rule a child believes. You come bearing breach and balm. You will be judged. You will be given 3 paths. You will choose, and then you will be allowed to pay. The Emperor bows the exact measure owed. The hole in his light shows like a clean scar. He does not hide it. There is no point hiding in a room built of knowing. Behind him, West City adds 3 more dampers to a school roof and labels the switches with stickers that say, "Don't touch unless you breathe first." In the lookout, Dende plants a seed that is not a metaphor and hums until it thinks it is safe to sprout. On Beerus's planet, the tree does nothing at all, which is how trees show gratitude. He breathes in, he breathes out, he steps forward to be weighed. The corridor bows around a planet of simple ceremony. Angels take station ahead and behind, staffs down, smiles like sealed envelopes. Shin walks at the Emperor's left shoulder, Kibito at his right, both holding a posture learned in disasters. Beerus ambles with a predator's leisure, Whis steers without touching, all courtesy and angles. They pause at the lookout because the world below asked them to. Dende meets them in a small white room that smells like rain in a bowl. He bows deeper than he should for a being he cannot weigh, then sets both hands over the place in the Emperor's chest where the casing bent out of shape. I can mend bodies, Dende says. This thing is not a body. It touches one, the Emperor replies quietly. Dende hums a note the Makians learned before rain knew it was rain. The hum runs along nerves that have watched too many mornings arrive. The pain shifts from edge to surface, which is all healing can do when the wound is math. The leak does not stop. The shoulders relax half a finger width. Thank you, the Emperor says. Mr. Popo stands by the door like a shadow that knows when curtains should be drawn. He looks at the Emperor's silhouette and says nothing, which is also medicine. On the terrace, Piccolo waits with the kind of silence that does not burden a sick room. He didn't close it, he says when the Emperor steps out, meaning the hole where a syllable used to live. He shouldn't, Dende murmurs. Scars teach hands not to reach for the same wall twice. Shin walks with the tall man toward the corridor's next bend. Your cost is not a flaw, the Kai says, half mentor, half auditor. It is the price you write on the ticket to yourself. Do not pretend to be cheaper. Dogma often wants cheaper, the Emperor answers. It calls it purity. It forgets the ledger. Kibito's mouth thins. Dogma keeps ledgers for a reason. It remembers the blood price so the living don't forget the math. They step back into Whis's hall. Angels close around like hymn guards, beautiful, bored, The leak whispers. Dende's note threads through it and keeps it from sounding like panic. Whis slows the corridor without anyone feeling slowed. One more chapel, he says with a pleasant lie, knowing what waits is not a chapel and not comfort. The wall to the right turns translucent. It isn't a window, it is a viewing into a quiet place where those who keep laws whisper to themselves in the voice of people they love so the laws won't feel lonely. The Emperor pauses. He sees himself in an earlier era, a younger man in a cave counting breaths while storms teach him his fraction. He holds that older self with a respect that refuses nostalgia. "We go," he says. The corridor brightens, as if a higher room opened a door. Something moves into their route, smooth as mathematics, pale as inevitability. It is tall, robed in angles, crowned by a knot crown, with a face like an icon rubbed clean. It has the Emperor's height, the Emperor's patience, the Emperor's absence of swagger. It is the version of him that signed the spotless contract. Kibito draws breath to protect the Kai. Shin raises a hand. "Wait." The mirror smiles without teeth. "Optimization," it says with the Grand Priest's politeness poured into a cup the Emperor's hand would fit. "Remove refusal. Remove pride. You will become function. Think of the lives saved when your hunger for self is gone." Beerus looks intrigued. "I like him," he says. He would obey. Whis' staff hums very slightly, the way a brother clears his throat when a sibling tells a dangerous joke. "Mirror foe," the angel says softly. "A test. Please do not break the corridor." The mirror gestures. Its gesture edits 3 minutes into a single permission slip. Become less. The Emperor steps aside without moving, as if a tide carried him beyond permission. "I am not hungry for self," he says. "I am hungry for obligation." Obligation becomes a shield in the mirror's hands. It points it like a blade. Then remove the part of you that pleasures itself with choosing. Become the wall. The world needs walls, not men who write poetry about them. Shin glances down. His mouth tilts in pain at how precisely the cut lands. "Poetry is load-bearing," he says without volume. The mirror tilts its head. "Your leak feeds predators," it says. "Sign here, become 0, and all leaks stop." The Emperor raises one hand. He does not summon light. He does not anchor breath into a net. He lifts his palm and shows it history. Children taught to stand in lines and return home. Planets held a few more decades, so a simpler god could arrive in time. Names he can no longer say, because a god with cat's eyes erased 1 syllable worth of titles. He shows it without pride. He does not argue merits. He shows whether. The mirror is not persuaded. It is not built for persuasion. It is an instrument. It steps closer with a clean idea. A world without noise. He steps into its reach. He presses his palm to where its heart would be if it had one. "This shape would save many," he says, and the honesty makes the angel's circle tighten very slightly. It would also burn forests to protect furniture. It would end stories to avoid tears. It is wrong for me. The mirror touches the hole in his light without touching. "You already burn," it says. "You ask others to bear the smoke." He inclines his head. "I ask them because I am with them, because I will smell like smoke too." It moves, not fast, not slow. A hand reaches for the converter, not to destroy, but to switch it off and replace it with nothing. The Emperor rotates his ribs around the touch and places the hole the cat made exactly in the mirror's path. The hand slides into absence and finds nothing to switch. For a heartbeat, the mirror considers that a wound can be a refusal. "Clever," it says, contempt hissing under courtesy. Beerus is very entertained. "Can I keep both?" he asks Whis. "This one to ignore rules and this one to be rules." A sign forms in light above the corridor, small and dignified, a circle with a dot, as if someone drew an eye and then remembered to be kind. Whis tilts his head. Father advises against collecting paradoxes today. He suggests we proceed. The mirror's robe of angles tightens. You do not have to love self, it says in low offer. You have to love success. Success is obeying before the bell. We can take the music out of your choice and leave only the timing. He shakes his head. Choice without song is still a song. It is a beat. It says we exist. It steps back, as if he disappointed it. You will destroy fewer worlds this way, it concedes, which in his grammar is an insult wrapped as mercy. Good, he says. It tilts once, like a metronome resetting. It dissolves back into rule. The corridor remembers it was only a hall and not a trial of confession. Angels relax by half eyelashes. What would that have made you? Shin asks, voice warm with fear. He did not know how to name until it passed. An answer dressed as peace, the Emperor says. Answers that dress too well become prisons. Kibito glances at Whis. Does father approve this refusal? Whis smiles like wallpaper that hides a door. He approves that the refusal did not require us to intervene. He approves that the guest can hold a mirror without either lovers taking offense. He taps the staff gently. Proceed. Reach the throne. The corridor opens into the approach. It is not a planet in terms ships use. It is a palace anchored on a quiet wedge of time. Its stair is a Milky Way of deliberate steps. Its gate is a geometry that lets small creatures feel dignified rather than small. Its guards wear gold that does not glitter. They are not angels. They are the blank-faced enforcers who escort Zeno to places where love must be terrified into behaving. Ki does not pull here. It is discouraged from being loud, so that every visitor must carry their quiet with them. The air is thick with politeness. Bulma's projection flickers on out of stubbornness and hacking. She clamps her jaw. Okay, that's a fortress, she says. Capsule Corp approves the load-bearing minimalism. Android 18 exhales as if she just walked into a school where no children live. It smells like rules. Piccolo lowers his chin, the way martial artists do when they enter a dojo. They have no ranking. He lets every muscle relax and wakes them one at a time to tell them this is not a place for springing. They climb. The stairs are long by design, so that guests must discover what fatigue does to their tone. The Emperor does not hide breath. He does not dramatize it either. The leak keeps counting. 78%. 79. He smooths it with presence. He does not pretend it went down. The throne is not a chair. It is a room where perception knits itself into courtesy and back again. Zeno sits in the middle like a bright child who believes every day when told there will be no homework, and is wrong exactly when that belief saves something important. On either side, two versions of him, time doubled and agreeable. The Grand Priest stands behind like a line whose slope adjusts worlds. Angels stage left and right. Beerus takes his place among destroyers, like a knife set back in its slot. Shin steps forward and bows, then does it again. The second bow a personal thank you for not ending everything the last time boredom needed a toy. The Emperor stands at the foot of attention. He does not kneel. Zeno does not ask. He offers a small wave with round hands, delighted. Hi, Zeno says, voice soft like a bell under blankets. You are new. Yes, the Emperor says. I brought a question and a fault. Fun, Zeno says, and kicks his feet. Questions are fun. Faults are toys. The Grand Priest's smile is an axiom. The visitor stabilized his breach, fought without turning our furniture into metaphors, refused an optimization that would have simplified our bookkeeping, and now asks permission to borrow a principle. We give him the test of speech. Words do not move through air here. They exchange as feeling folded into mind light. The room becomes two things at once, a courtroom and a chapel. The Emperor stands in both. Zeno shows him a hallway of worlds. In one, mercy wins too early, and the spared claw back and eat the sparer. In another, destruction wins too late, and the delay breeds peculiar cruelty. In a third, guardians build walls so tall to stop chaos that sunlight forgets how to find infants. The Emperor offers his hallway. In one, he keeps his empire with iron and saves trillions, who grow small. In another, he becomes function and ends rot and music together. In a third, he dies on purpose to teach his successors humility, and they hang humility on a wall, because no one explained how to use it. The Grand Priest steps between the hallways. "What is war?" he asks, not rhetorically. "War is a jammed machine that eats names," the Emperor says. "It is also a bell. If struck correctly, it tells a city to wake." "What is mercy?" the Grand Priest asks. "Mercy is the refusal to finish a story with a clean line when you know the messy paragraph might save more," he answers. Zeno claps his hands once, happy. "I like messy paragraphs," he says. They show him the warp without calling it that. It appears as a sea of unassigned want. They show him key without naming it either. It holds as a hearth that will not feed on guests. They let him feel the difference and where they can be friends and where they cannot. He shows them the part of his light that purifies want and how it costs him, slice by slice, because every purification is a promise the body keeps. "3 paths," the Grand Priest says, and the room listens, because the next hour will sit behind every later hour like an elder. You may return on your own line with what you learned, and let memory take you as toll. You may remain without stamp and become a free instrument under observation, splitting balances until someone erases you. Or you may accept sanction, lose some autonomy to gain capacities here, and spread your principle through permitted hardware and etiquette. He does not choose yet. The test is not given. First must come the weight that makes choice honest. Bound, the Grand Priest adds softly, until the hearing closes. The Emperor's light constricts. He feels leashes that are not humiliation, but courtesy braided into handholds, so others can stop him without destroying him. He nods. "I accept bonds." Beerus turns his head, pleased. He loves bonds if he is not the one wearing them. They recess without moving. A smaller room unfolds within the big one, the way tea unfolds inside a cup held by a father. Whis escorts the Emperor into it with Shin and one null attendant who wears no key and radiates patient disinterest. The null's proximity steals heat from the converter casing. The leak calms by 1 percentage point and waits to see if it is allowed to climb again. It will be. The room is part medici, part chapel. Bulma's hollow figures out a path along authorized lists and draws herself onto a small tablet at the edge like a face at a hospital window. "How's your heart?" she asks. "It functions," he says. "Functioning is winning," she says, and drops her voice. "I did a stupid thing. I wrote a crude version of your sanctified emptiness into a coil that doesn't know it is smart. If I clip it to your belt, will that offend fathers?" The null attendant looks at Whis. Whis looks at the Grand Priest through a sliver of hierarchy that slices through 10 walls. A nod returns. "Hardware only," Whis says. "It must draw from itself and the air, not your light." Bulma grins. "I can do rude. I ship in 5, 4, 3. A capsule pops open on the little table with a noise like relief. The coil inside is ugly and honest. The Emperor clips it to his belt. It hums like kitchens. Shin sits on a bench that is both wood and policy, and speaks what mentors speak when dogma has been made honest by proximity to bleeding. "We want you to win," he says. "We also want you to obey, We want you to teach without teaching. We want you to go home and not be eaten by. The way home will bite you. We are not consistent. Be more consistent than us. I will try, the Emperor says. Kibito stands in the doorway and watches like a big brother who knows he cannot carry the fight for the younger, but will throw stones at anything that tries to cheat. A bell that is not a bell sounds. It is an authorization to continue. They rise. The null attendant precedes them, carving a small lull in the air that keeps powers from arguing in a hallway. On the return walk toward judgment, a veil wavers. The mirror returns, but thinner now, permitted only a last offer, like the dessert cart pushed by a waiter who heard no sweets and still tries. Take the free agent path, it whispers. Be a knife no one owns. It will scratch your itch to do, and you will die with fewer regrets. Beerus overhears. Free agent smells like sport, he says thoughtful. Sanction smells like paperwork. Return smells like a story that thinks it ends. Whis' staff glows very slightly in warning. No campaigning in the halls, he chides. They re-enter the throne. The second part of the hearing is not argument. It is exposure. The Grand Priest lifts a hand and pours into the room a vision of the Emperor's enemies. Things that drink belief until it curdles and then sell the curd. They show worlds turned on their sides, so that hope runs off like water and dries into crust you can feed to armies. They show a woman teaching children to breathe while the sky calls her treason, because her breath replaced fear with pattern. Your war, the Grand Priest says, is not a god's hobby. It is a machine that deserves an engineer. Machines are my least favorite kind of romance, Beerus mutters. The Emperor speaks without flourish. I request sanction to operate within these walls' laws. I will not teach cultivation. I will teach breathing with hardware. I will stabilize what my entry disturbed. I will leave when you say so. I will not become instrument. Zeno leans forward, eyes bright. If you promise, you keep, he says. Promises are my favorite toys. The Grand Priest's smile has no edges. We will deliberate for 2 breaths, he says, and every breath in the hall becomes as heavy as an hour and as light as mercy. Power scaling, interlude, 2. Under sanction, the Emperor's field is capped to 1 city's worth of stress correction per hour. Exceeding that cap triggers null attendance that damp his converter to idle. Sanctuary emptiness can be opened twice per day. The 3rd opening requires a father's sign. Namesiever damage persists until a Kai level right is held at a place of shared breath. Lookout, Kai Realm Terraces, and cannot be patched by key alone. Hardware dampers operate without his presence, but must be human-tended. Unattended nets decay into harmless hum. Direct engagement with a Kai is limited to deflection by prearranged nulls. Counter erasure is forbidden. The Grand Priest lowers his hand. Sanction, he says simply. Bound tools, bounded hours, bounded pride. Break our bounds and we unmake your method. Zeno claps. Yea, he says, and the room ripples like a lake told a nice secret. The bonds tighten, not as chains, but as a vest that fits. The Emperor feels operating limits seeped into ID-lit grooves on his ribs. He bows his head once. Acknowledged. Shin's shoulders drop a fraction too much, like a man who carried a bowl without spilling, and then realizes his hands shake. Kibito watches the null attendants peel away from the walls to take up their new assignment with the visitor. Beerus looks satisfied, the kind of satisfaction that in him means he anticipates a sport wrapped in rule. You chose the path that keeps you where I can see you, he says. Wise. Bulma's projection thumbs up. Bound pride, she mutters. Some of us have been waiting to hear a god say that. Piccolo exhales and folds the sound away. Android 18 smiles, just once, toward the child in the plaza, who will never know any of these names, only that the sky stayed where skies belong. They leave the throne in a procession that refuses to look like a parade. Angels resume their punctuation. The null attendants pace the emperor like quiet commas. The corridor chooses to not be interesting. On the way back through the lookout, Dende meets them with a small bowl that smells like forgiveness and vitamins. "Drink," he says, which is what fathers say when they cannot fix the big things but insist on fixing the small. The emperor drinks. The taste is clean and green, and neither miracle nor shrug. Shin stands with him at the edge, where Earth's clouds look like the backs of sleeping animals. Cost versus dogma, the Kai says, revisiting the old axis like a teacher with a chalkboard and a new student who deserves the best lesson. We cut where necessary. We refuse where possible. We bind pride. We do not mistake obedience for virtue. We serve breath. "I will serve breath," the emperor answers. He does not call it poetry. He calls it logistics. An alarm crosses the corridor like a polite cough that warns of a spill. A Mirafo signature glances the route again, testing the sanctioned seams. One of the null attendants looks up. Its eyes are a sort of absence that makes halos adjust themselves. A small glyph unfolds above them, a circle with a dot again. Permission to ignore. Law as a lullaby. Go home, Whis says lightly, and the corridor bends toward the blue planet where obligations live with fewer committees. The path back is shorter because courtesy, once established, accelerates. The emperor listens to the leak song. The coil on his belt eats the worst notes. The meter holds at 81% and does not climb because constraints can be kindness. They step out over West City in mid-afternoon sunlight. The dampers hum like bored appliances. A child's kite performs the same loop as earlier, insistently ordinary. Bulma meets them with a press pass and oil on her fingers. "Sanction?" she asks. "Sanction," Shin confirms, trying the word in his mouth like a fruit. He misjudged and then found sweet. "Bound hours," Whis adds. "Bound ego." Beerus yawns. "We are done with pageantry. Someone bleed me later," he says, and disappears in a ripple that smells like naps and ultimatums. The emperor looks at the plaza and at the small changes since morning. A new planter box near a lamppost. A broken bench slat repaired badly and working anyway. Stickers on a curb cover that say "breathe in 3 languages." He looks at Bulma's coil on his belt and hears it humming duty. He turns his palms out and speaks to the city as if it were a person who deserves details. "I am the same," he says, "and bound. I will act only where consent lives and where the hour permits. If I overreach, I will stop. If I leak, you will hear and you may ask me to leave. I accept these rules. People do not often get asked. Nod when they are asked." A woman on a scooter lifts 2 fingers in a salute that is not military and not mockery. It is civic. On the lookout, Dende leans into the rail and sings a line about seeds and patience. Corin snores in the sun because wisdom sometimes naps while heroes negotiate. The emperor sets a hand to his chest over the warped casing. He does not hide the sound the coil makes as it chews bad notes. He looks east where the ocean folds its thoughts. He looks up where rooms of law hang like lanterns in a polite night. He thinks bound is not small, bound is precise. He breathes in, he breathes out. He reaches for work that keeps children laughing in plazas built by people who do not worship but do repair, and the day answers with the kind of light that makes even gods admit they enjoy afternoons. The afternoon leans toward gold. The city goes about its work under a sky that remembers trials and pretends it is just weather. Bound hours begin to tick like honest clocks. Sanction sits on his ribs like a fitted vest. The coil hums on his belt, eating the hiss. He stands in the plaza and gives the people his posture so their spines can borrow it. The vision arrives without warning and with courtesy. It does not blind. It opens the room around his mind until the walls become options. In one direction, he returns. The path back is a clean incision through realities. The wound edges cinch behind him. He arrives where his empire bleeds and pours breath into it like water on a hot pulse. The converter holds at a safer angle when used only among his own. He begins to graft the quiet devices Bulma designed onto ship bulkheads and hive gutters. It works. It costs. Memory fades, not like an insult, but like mist when sun insists. Names he earned thin. Faces blur gently. The oath remains. He can no longer say what he offered to whom, only that he owes. Mercy becomes a metronome and then a habit. Habits save thousands and starve a few miracles. He dies someday on a balcony between storms, and the empire keeps breathing, because he taught it to count. The counting is not love, but it keeps children alive in numbers that embarrass his enemies. In another, he becomes free agent. He remains between worlds, under no stamp and under all eyes. He walks the seams and kills precision for the sake of possibility. Pries open doors and leaves contraband hope on thresholds. He refuses courts, hates invitations, dances in the space where emergencies have not yet become funerals. He is weapon, witness, rumor. The leak becomes a banner that predators chase and chasing, expose their throats. He bleeds and wins in a ratio mortals would call heroism and angels would call expensive. He dies in a beautiful place because he refused ugly rooms, and a billion small repairs across a dozen worlds hold for a few more generations because he passed through and left stubbornness in their wells. In the third, he is sanctioned servant. He accepts the vest and the hour and the concerts that follow him. He becomes a wall that learns names he does not take. He works with engineers and children and the kind of God who is willing to say, sorry, in a kitchen. He builds nets and writes sentences that stop bad weather. He admits limits with a voice that can pull a city back from panic. Fathers trust him because he lets judgment sit without flinching. Predators bite his edges and break teeth on small laws. He does not leave when bored. He leaves when the bell says the hour is spent. He watches others carry the next hour. He does not resent. He is, by design, a proof that humility can wield a strong arm without becoming proud of itself. He considers not which path gives him the most pain. Pain does not decide him. He considers which path will leave the largest number breathing with enough laughter left to invent things that are not weapons. He lets the vision close like a book that chose its reader. He turns to the city because choices ought to be spoken where consequences live. I take the bound road, he says simply, and the sanction he already wears deepens from permission to marriage. I'm your guest. I am their instrument in narrow ways. I will be a wall you can ask to move. Bulma does not clap. She nods. Android 18 whispers, not to him, to the child in her arms through the screen. Listen to how he phrases weight. Shin bows, relief a softening he does not display often. Then we will make a right, he says, not to erase cost, but to teach it how to sit in you without biting the wrong part. They go to the lookout at sundown, because the light knows how to keep secrets then. The platform holds the night the way a handhold carries a climber. Dende sets a bowl in the center of the tiles and fills it with water that remembers rain. Mr. Popo brings a small bell that was not forged. It was taken from a noon years ago when someone needed that sound to survive. Shin and Kibito bring a ribbon cut from policy itself, a strip of consent that binds pride into service without shutting it down to zero. The Emperor kneels because kneeling here is not surrender, it is alignment. He places the coil from Bulma beside the bowl. Bulma's little projection sits on the rim and refuses to be solemn, which is her form of piety. Name sever will not restore your lost syllable, Shin says, straightforward and kind. We can reseat your anchor. We can teach the casing to wear scar tissue. It will never be as elegant as before. Elegance is not a virtue where children live. Dendi hums. The hum threads the hole without trying to fill it. The bell rings once when the humming and the wind agree. The ribbon loops around his thorax and warms like law, deciding it can be gentle. The coil listens and changes its note. He breathes. The leak slows. The casing does not straighten. It relaxes. The ache moves to the surface where hands can tell when it is anger and when it is simply the body remembering. The missing syllable remains missing. A death in his heraldry. He will carry it like a proper widower carries a name. Good, Shin says, and that is the theology. He stands. The golden field around him is not the same. It is tighter and clearer, the hue of clean brass under thin varnish. Over his heart, above the scar, light gathers into a symbol new and honest. The double-headed aquila reduces to a single, spare wing that folds around a simple circle with a dot. The dot is the sanction sign. The wing is a will that knows itself a guest. It is not a crest to frighten. It is a badge to warn. Shin nods once as if a seal was pressed atop a law. Whis inclines his head with a craftsman's appreciation for how constraints make a better tool. Beerus squints at the new mark and shrugs. As long as the dot means, "You don't annoy me at nap time," he mutters. The boundaries clause is spoken in public at dawn because vows should stand in the same light people use to walk to work. He stands in the plaza, Piccolo above, 18 to the side, Krillin at the curb, Bulma on the microphone with a scientist's patience and a parent's timing. The city watches, not crowded, just present. I bind myself, he says, palm open, the new symbol bright and calm. I will not teach cultivation. I will not teach metaphysics. I will build only tools that breathe and then stop breathing when a hand asks them to stop. I will fix only what I disturbed and what others request in the open. I will not counter erasure. I will deflect it where I can without insulting the office. I will open my sanctuary twice in a day at most. If I must open it thrice, I will ask fathers. I will not act without consent of your secular and sacred guardians here. I will submit to a Kai's hand on my shoulder when they say enough. I will leave if my leak sings too loud. I will ask mercy of my enemies and show it when they lay down their will. Shin steps forward and lays his hand on the Emperor's shoulder, and the crowd understands that, as we heard. Bulma touches the coil and the coil purrs. Android 18 watches his face for pride and sees none she dislikes. Piccolo listens for false notes and hears only fatigue held in dignity. A boy with a kite walks close and stops. He looks up at the badge and smiles like it is a sticker he will draw on his notebook. That looks neat, he says. He doesn't know he just named a symbol that will hang on doors across a galaxy year by year. Paper first, then metal, then custom where needed. One bound hour passes with no catastrophe. The second hour begins with a call from the ocean, polite as a housekeeper asking if you have towels. Something large, old, dissatisfied, has learned to tap lightly on worlds to see what comes. It taps twice, just outside a fishing harbor with painted boats. He goes with Bulma's consent, with Shin's nod, with Piccolo's glance that says, "Don't die doing dishes." He drops onto a grey morning tide. The smell is tar and brine and a salt the wind is proud of. The thing is not a creature in ways fishermen will recognize. It is a pressure event with curiosity. It wants to know if walls here are rude. He does not throw a wall. He writes on the air. You will not be hungry near the sound of nets. He puts the sentence in with gentleness and the kind of authority a grandmother uses when she tells a big animal to leave the tomatoes. The pressure curls, offends for a second, then seems to remember its grandmother and glides outward into deeper water where appetite belongs. On the pier, an old man removes his hat because something told him to. A girl with a red bucket shouts, "By ocean." He leaves the edges smoother than he found them. His meter ticks, inside the bound hour, under the cap where it should sit. The leak whispers, the coil eats. He returns to the city and signs paperwork with Bulma's lawyers, because gods who accept sanctions should enjoy the same patience as garbage contracts and school ordinances. He signs a clause that says Capsule Corp can't sell the coils. He signs a clause that says dampers installed in public belong to public. He signs one that says if he disappears, the devices must degrade into furniture. Across the planet, other work rises to meet his hours. He lays a small net under a train bridge where a fracture threatened to become a slur. He stands in a hospital hall and lets his presence calm a row of machines so a surgeon can trust her hands. He steps between two shouted men in a council meeting and says only one word, later. And the word gives the room a future it uses to be decent. Between hours, he rests. Rest is now discipline, not luxury. He stands on Capsule Corp's roof and watches stars hide behind city glow and refuses to resent the glow because it is made of lives buying bread and saving for shoes. The sharper foe arrives in the third bound hour with the permission slip already stamped. It falls from the sky like a red thought, small and smiling. It is not Beerus. It is a man in black and rose who wears someone's face with a god's contempt. Zamasu, wearing Kakarot, Goku black, the perpetual litigant against messy creation. He chose the hour because he wanted fair lights. He chose the place because witness makes his sermons better. Piccolo feels it first and bares his teeth. Bulma's hack throws the alert on every screen she holds. Shin's face cools with a very particular sadness. Android 18's stance becomes a line with a purpose. Krillin's soul checks its shoes and ties them again. Black lands on the edge of the plaza like a judge late for a party he intends to end. He smiles at the badge on the Emperor's chest. "You chose the leash," he says, voice silk with a blade under. "You chose to be furniture in a room I intend to burn. Furniture holds up what matters," the Emperor says. "You chose to be a fire that thinks it is a philosopher." Black laughs. He raises his hand toward the nearest damper box and sends a precise Kai blade at it. The blade should have made it shrapnel and drama. It lances in and comes out bored. Bulma's dumb coils do not declare. They draw a breath and the blade finds nothing to argue with. It passes through and cuts a lamppost that was eager for a story. The lamppost shears and leans and stops because the net asks it to remember being vertical. "Interesting," Black says. He smiles wider. "And trivial. I do not need to break your toys to erase your sin. I will erase you." He lifts 2 fingers. The air around him turns into a page he means to write on with murder. "Consent," the Emperor says, and glances at Shin. Shin nods once. "We have to let him hit something, or he will go around us and hit worse. End him under our rules." Beerus appears on a nearby roofline, as if the breeze told him there would be entertainment. Whis hums. The Grand Priest does not appear. He does not always need to be present to be present. The Emperor steps forward to the center of the plaza and squares himself. His badge gleams, wing and dot. The coil hums. He does not open sanctuary, he saves it. He does not write arcs in space. Black would relish the argument. He holds witness like a pole across a road. Black moves like ballet in contempt. He lights his hand with the pink gold of a god's violation and cuts with words about justice. The cut aims for the converter because myth loves repeated blows. The Emperor lets the cut pass where name-sever left absence. It slides too far and takes nothing. Black blinks, then grins, delighted that the toy has seams he can explore. What a wound, Black purrs. I will write my verdict there. You will not, the Emperor says. He shifts his weight and sets his palm under Black's ribcage with tenderness that produces panic in men who enjoy cruelty. He pushes one idea into Black's spine. You are late. The word is not magic. It is disdain. It lands like a date missed by a villain who wanted to be the only story. Black staggers as if his own elegance tripped him. They trade. The plaza holds, dampers hum, nets rest. Android 18 moves civilians out with the efficiency of a woman who has seen too many fights start near ice cream carts. Piccolo draws a ring around the space with his gaze and warns the sky, stay put. Black escalates to Rose, the white-hot valor theft that lets him call himself divine. He forms the scythe that has turned time into confetti and joy into past tense. He spins the blade toward the badge as if to snip off permission. The Emperor does not counter. He opens Sanctuary once, only once, behind his right shoulder and steps the badge side through the door into an absence Black cannot consent to. The scythe bites air and eats its own confidence. He closes the door and feels the day shorten. Blood does not run, but a tremor does, down old bones. Sanction watches. The hour ledger marks one use. Black laughs harder. Ah, you flee into nothing, he says, cruel and honest. You are already halfway to my theology. I am halfway to refusal, the Emperor says, and puts his left hand on Black's right wrist, like a father catching a child's form error. He twists just so. The scythe leaves Black's hand and goes into the street and becomes a harmless idea, because it has no doctrine to feed on there, and the coil is eating stray notes. Beerus's mouth curls. This is decent, he murmurs. Whis says nothing. He watches for the moment a slash might become an exile. Black moves to cut the crowd and pretend it was the Emperor's lack of speed. Piccolo lands between. Cape a wall. Eyes a warning. Android 18's heel shoots a precise arc into Black's shin. That is not a mistake. It is an insult. Krillin flicks a destructo disc at a safe angle, so the villain knows two things at once. You are not the only one who learned to cut, and the rest of us do not need gods to start our sentences. The Emperor could end it with a pre-written emptiness and a narrative closure gambit that tells Black his project succeeded, and therefore he needs to depart. He does not. That gambit calms hungry creatures who hunger without malice. Black is not hunger. He is pride with a theology. Pride deserves correction, not lullabies. He chooses the harder mercy. He closes distance, collects Black's attention with a glance that acknowledges what he might have been in a better room. He speaks one sentence that is not a trick, and not a banishment, and not a permit. Lay down, he says. I will not pursue you if you leave this city and never return. Black laughs. It is the laugh of a god who does not hear conditions without hearing insult. You cannot command the divine, he says. I can, the Emperor says with zero joy and full accuracy. But I am asking. Mercy in this city has rules. One of them is take the exit you are offered. Black abandons laughter because a man who accepts mercy does not get to write an epic. He dives, all blades and story. The plaza tightens. The city watches mercy reach its last acceptable extension. The Emperor meets him at that line. He does not break him. He breaks his posture. He takes his balance. He closes on the wrist that once held a farm boy's kindness and refuses to let it right. Lies today. He pins Black to stone that is older than speeches. He looks down and says, very plainly, enough. Then he lifts his hand. Shin appears in the breath between strike and aftermath with the authority a gardener uses when a neighbor tries to salt his beds. By sanction, the Kai says, touching Black's forehead with 2 fingers that carry policy and pity. You leave. Black vanishes with the snap of a page turned by editorial fiat. He does not die. He does not enjoy the travel. He is sent elsewhere, far from children. He will take this humiliation, add it to his gospel, and become more dangerous where law is thinner. For now, the city remains. The hour is half spent. The coil hums low, content. The badge glows, bright enough to be seen on the edge of camera frames and in the eyes of people who will forget names and remember the dot. He looks at Bulma. Next, he says, like a clerk finally settling into a job. Next, Bulma agrees, because the world is not saved by climaxes, it is saved by cues. There is a list, a damper to be placed under an old bridge, a null attendant to be introduced to a utility manager who will become a better bureaucrat because a patient absence stood next to his desk, a visit to a school where a teacher wants to show children how to breathe before tests, because breathing is free and schools are poor. He moves through it without haste. Haste is vanity pretending to be urgency. At evening, Beerus leans on a rooftop, tail twitching like a punctuation mark that refuses to be dot or comma. Later, he calls conversationally. We finish a matter our fathers interrupted. Later, the Emperor returns, and the word rings between them as promise, not bravado. Whis floats 2 stories above street level, amused and precise. You proved a theorem, he says. Bound power can still comfort without becoming pornography. Father is pleased with the way you look at clocks. Shin steps back onto the lookout and recruits Dende to plant seeds with intent. They place dampers not only under rocks, but under ceremonies. A quiet hum in a place where oaths are taken badly and need a room that ensures regret can lead to repair. Dende waters the devices with patience, which is a Namekian's favorite fertilizer. Night then. City lights. People at windows, some praying, some laughing, some cursing scaffolds and politicians and rent. He stands where he can see 1,000 small rooms, and none of them are his. It is enough to hold his hands open and refuse to close them. Above this, rooms with carpets speak. In Universe 7, Jiren sits in a bare chamber and considers a dot over a wing, and wonders what limits mean when will is the only muscle he trusts. Far away in cold space, Frieza watches a flicker of a badge on a grainy feed and smiles with his teeth tucked in, because he has been mortal enough times to understand bureaucracy is a weapon. He orders the science team to build him coils. They will try. The coils will hum and do nothing because they are too polite to obey cruelty, and Frieza will turn 3 engineers into an example because politeness annoys him. In a god's quarter, the Grand Priest writes a line in a ledger. Sanctioned servant to U7, Emperor, operational. He adds a margin note. Watch for creep. He is not cruel. He is father. He juggles knives named worlds and loves each awkwardly and well. In the else, an Eld Erasure monk sits in a chamber that does not have corners and plans a test for a later season. A ring wider, faster, kinder, meant to slice concepts too subtle to show in daylight. It will arrive when he thinks the tall man is relaxed. He is wrong about the relaxing. On Earth, in a small apartment where the elevator jams every 3rd day, the boy with the ice cream sits on his bed and draws. He draws the badge, wing and dot. He draws his kite. He draws a wall with a door. He writes in a child's alphabet. Later, then he goes to sleep with the window cracked open so the city can breathe through his room. The epilogue is not a single scene. It is a set of echoes. Weeks bleed forward, not like wounds, like ink lines that dry into maps. The badge appears on discrete plaques where coils sleep, in a subway bend where fear used to stack, in a storm drain where a monster twice tried to wake, on a hospital wall next to the fire extinguisher, because both save in different days. People begin to tap the dot for luck. It is not worship. It is gratitude shaved down until superstition can carry it for cheap. Bulma's legal team publishes an open tech license that is written so plainly, even warlords get bored reading. No arms, the second clause begins. No exceptions, the third repeats. Shop teachers in 9 countries print the plans and teach their classes how to assemble a box that hums tidily when placed where gossip gets nasty. The boxes fail when pride barks orders at them. They excel when a janitor hums while sweeping. Piccolo trains under a tree and lets the new rhythm work around him. It cuts nothing important. It lets wind be wind. He adds one new exercise to his students' practice: stand and witness. Some of them hate it. They prefer punches. The ones who learn it throw fewer punches and win more fights. Android 18 takes a contract to protect a water plant and keeps 3 men alive by pointing at a coil and saying, "Breathe, then hit. Not before." They obey. Later, she buys ice cream without telling anyone why it tasted like a reward. Shin and Kibito sit on a terrace and argue gently about doctrine. Shin writes a footnote into the Kai manual. Mercy is not a loophole. It is a load-bearing beam. Kibito lets the footnote stand. The Kai manual improves. Beerus challenges the Emperor twice, and both times stops before the white edge. He calls it boredom. It is not boredom. It is an experiment in seeing if cats can practice respect without losing their whiskers. Whis smiles into his sleeve and gives no comment to reporters, because angels who comment create cults. Goku and Vegeta return from a length of training that left dust on a small planet and hunger in 2 stomachs. They hear about debates and badges and coils and a god who uses later like a sword. Goku grins like a boy offered a new kind of running. Vegeta crosses his arms and offers skepticism like a gift he will upgrade later. They meet the Emperor in the plaza. Goku asks if he can spar. The Emperor says, "After errands." Vegeta snorts, and the sound means, "Good answer." Frieza tries again with coils that are not polite. They hum wrong. They blister walls. They attract things with noses for mistakes. He kills 2 technicians and hires smarter ones. The smarter ones sign contracts with Capsule Corp under fake names and reverse engineer a plug that shuts down black market coils at a distance. They never tell Bulma because they owe her nothing and hate her less than they hate their boss. Moral arithmetic remains a terrible dialect. Zamasu writes a sermon in exile about furniture and cruelty and returns to his notes each night and fails to make the metaphor as sharp as he wants because he cannot stop hearing the word later in a voice that was not contempt. On Namek, elders and children learn a new song that is basically a shopping list for breath. It slides under children's arguments like oil under hinges. Some fights end at "and" instead of "because." The elders call that progress. The children call it boring. Both are right. In a dark between worlds, the warp frets. It is not here, not fully, but it hears breath where it used to hear shouting. It listens for praise and gets practice. It does not like practice. It learns to hate humming. It will send something that does not mind humming. That will be later. The Emperor's days settle into a shape that would disappoint poets and please mayors. 3 bound hours. 1 hour at the lookout, teaching Dende how to wrap ribbon around the hole without making a noose. 2 hours with Bulma's teams, writing course instructions for coils that villagers can afford. 4 hours public, walking markets and mechanics bays and district lines where disputes eat crops. meals as a practice of gratitude, sleep as a work order. The rest he calls Shabi as a reserve. He keeps a ledger. It is not written. It sits in the shoulder. It measures not in kills averted, but in interruptions refused. He declines 3 invitations a day to become an emblem hung on the wrong wall. He accepts one to sit at a school gym and let a child touch the badge to see that it is solid. One night, the Eld Erasure monk sends the wider ring. It arrives quiet as apology, fast as gossip. It moves to cut away the concept of guest and leave intruder. He feels it like a draft. He opens sanctuary the second time aloud, lets the ring pass through a room that exists only because fathers permitted him to keep a closet, and closes it. He pays the price, which is a morning where he cannot taste coffee. He drinks it anyway, because habit is a theorem about will. Sometimes he returns to the tea court on Beerus's world and sits on a cushion that does not squeak. Whis pours, Beerus leans. They speak less then, better. He tells Beerus a story about a moon over a siege that taught him to end a battle by ordering soldiers to sleep. He will not explain why that worked. Beerus tells him about a pudding cup, and the story is code for mercy. They will fight again. They will not waste each other. Occasionally, the court upstairs calls. The Grand Priest asks for a note on how the dumb devices fail, and because honesty is part of sanction, he sends it. Zeno waves whenever he sees the wing and Dot, and sometimes asks, "Do you like toys?" He says, "I like tools." And the child laughs as if gifts are different shapes of the same joy. The planet learns how to be watched without being eaten. There are mistakes. A mayor tries to order a coil to hum in an opponent's office. The coil pretends to be broken. A hero tries to project a sanctified emptiness at a tournament and bruises his soul. He gets better and apologizes. A sect prints the badge and sells it as armor. It does nothing. They sell it anyway. Later, one of their elders takes down the sign because he got tired of tourists asking dumb questions and realized he wants to stop lying before he dies. He makes one, only one, Dragon Ball request. It is not a wish. It is a negotiation. He asks Dende to tell the dragon a story. This world permitted a stranger to breathe here on a promise that he will not violate its grammar. If a wish is cast that would widen his leak, the wish must refuse politely. Shenron's eyes glow, amused. He says, "I do not take orders from guests." He pauses. He adds, "I do enjoy polite stories." After that, 2 wishes falter and turn into kinder ones. No one knows why except people who listen to coils. The last image of a season is not a war. It is a sticker. The boy with the ice cream sits on a curb and holds a pack of badges a cop gave him because the cop's kid printed too many. He peels one and presses it on his notebook. A simple wing curling around a dot. He draws a kite beside it. He adds a word he learned. Later. He looks up as the tall man walks by and lifts his hand. The man lifts his hand back. The coil hums. The city breathes. Far out, a map of Universe 7 overlays itself on no one's wall. Tiny dots appear on worlds where coils hum and badge plaques rust with dignity. Ports, monasteries, farms, law offices, kitchens. Between them, thin lines show routes where predators went and lost interest. The pattern is not glory. It is maintenance. A fleet in a dark place sees the pattern and decides to avoid. A cult sees it and calls it a curse. Their prayers go quiet under it, and they get bored and hunt elsewhere. A kind of angel trainee sees it and calls it pretty. His father tells him to call it operational overlay. He says pretty anyway. He will leave someday. He said he would. The badge will remain. Coils will break and be repaired. Children will forget the day he stood in the plaza and remember the time the net under the bridge hummed while they learn to ride a bike. Gods will yawn and duel and nap and wake and eat, and humans will make a mess and sweep it. And the line between calamity and chores will be held by people who have learned to say later to both fear and pride. He stands one more hour as the sun goes down, red enough to please old warriors and gentle enough to make mothers point. He looks up toward the places where decisions live, and down toward drains where decisions also live. He chooses again to be the wall that breathes,